This is the Inquisitive Minds Podcast.
Hey, thank you for tuning in to the Inquisitive Minds Podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Johnny Smith. With me today, my guest is an author and a marketing strategist, amongst many other things. Please welcome to the program, Lisa Kipps-Brown. Lisa, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Johnny.
I want to say first and foremost, I am honored that you will grace my little podcast with your presence. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I appreciate the invitation.
So, Lisa, if people, a lot of people I've spoke to about you actually have heard your name, but then they can't place it. And when I tell them what it is, they go, oh, yeah, that's what it is. So to get the elephant out of the room, she's the marketing strategist behind the history-making NASCAR team racing to combat veteran suicide. And we will jump to that. But I just want to start us off and let you know, ask you where you're coming from.
You mean like where I grew up, or like?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Oh, so today I'm coming from Halifax, Virginia. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit out of it today. Yeah, I grew up in Southern Virginia, South Boston, Virginia, and that's where I am today, the little town of Halifax, just north of Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina.
Okay, now what got you into becoming a marketing strategist? Actually, and that's something, can you break that down a little bit more?
Yeah, so my degree is actually in accounting. And I was really, really good at it, passed the CPA exam without studying, but hated it. Yes, hated it. I found out I don't like repetitive tasks. I like things with a beginning and an end. I didn't even know I was creative. And I also like to work with people who are like weird and don't like to fit in, within constraints. And so in 95, I discovered web design. At the time, I was the controller of an international software company, and I discovered web design, and I realized that I loved it. It was perfect for a combination of my business and entrepreneurial experience, but also logic. And so I ditched everything else.
Real quick, you said at the time you were what?
I was the financial controller for an international software company.
Now that sounds impressive. What does that actually mean?
Okay, so the controller is the person who's in charge of all the finances.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
not a bookkeeper, not an accountant, the person that's over all that.
Okay. So in 95, you were just getting in on the ground floor then of web design.
Yeah, I had actually been an entrepreneur since 1990. I'd owned a couple other businesses that I had built and sold. But yeah, nobody was really doing web design then. And we couldn't go copy things from other people. Like my first shopping cart, I had to develop myself from scratch. And you couldn't even find anything online to help you learn how to do it. You had to go to bookstores to buy the books, Barnes and Noble, Borders, stuff like that. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's impressive because a shopping cart is something we take for granted. I wouldn't even know how to begin that. And so is it programming you're reading out of these books to figure out how to create this?
Yes, and my college roommates were floored. They're like, you never studied in college, and here you are with a book and a highlighter. But it's just something that really clicked with me because I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. It's like anything could be done, anything that you can imagine. And I've literally, even in the 90s, saved companies from bankruptcy. And I sold an online business right before the dot-com bubble burst. So so Google wasn't even around when I started, to put it in perspective.
You said you like to work with people that don't quite fit in. Well, you are in the right place.
Yeah, I like weirdos because I'm a weirdo.
I tell you what, just for meeting you, your energy coming through the screen is amazing.
Thanks.
I'm very interested in your business acumen here. What companies did you start and sell before the web design?
Okay, well, so my very first business was in 1990 when my husband was getting ready to retire from the Navy, and we were in Florida. The city we were in, there was a recession. We couldn't sell our home except at a loss, and so we couldn't move anywhere, and there were no jobs. So we ended up starting a vending company. And the reason we did that is we're like, okay, that's easy to get into. You can kind of piecemeal it. So 6 months before he retired, I had a 4-month-old and a 24-month-old, and I started that business from scratch. And when he retired in 6 months, he didn't even get a day off before he had to go to work. So he was happy that he had a company to walk into, but he wasn't happy that he couldn't take a day off. So that was the first company. Learned a lot from that. We built it up really successfully, but we learned from it the things that we didn't look at personally, like that we didn't think about lifestyle wise before we started it. So that's one thing that I'm able to pull in with other people who are thinking about starting a business. You know, you learn the hard way. So we sold that after a couple of years. Then we owned a yacht brokerage and new boat dealership. And during the recession, very first year had sales of over $1 million.
Oh, wow.
But again, you know, I'm one of these people, I just like to jump in things and do it. I'm not the type person to sit around and like overanalyze. So we loved the business, but there were still things lifestyle wise that weren't perfect for us. Like, hey, people who want to buy a boat go on the weekends and on holidays. We didn't want to work on weekends and holidays. So we sold that, and we were and I had a business consulting business. So while I was the controller for that for the software company, for the software company, I also had a side business where I was consulting with companies and like business strategy and that kind of thing. So I was kind of in between then. Then I discovered web design, and that was all she wrote. So
First off, that's very impressive, all
well,
that.
thanks.
Now, when you started web design, did you start like designing things for yourself? Did you want to create a website for yourself, or did you already have a goal in mind?
I'll be honest, I didn't really have a goal. First, I started just playing around, but my mind immediately just went poof. I'm one of these people, it's like there's like this one thing and it immediately starts going off in all these directions. And it's like I can see, and I'm not trying to pretend like I'm Albert Einstein or something, because I'm not, but it's like I can see way out possibilities, and it might not be the exact same thing, but it's like I go from a little thing to all of a sudden it's like a pinball. It just bounces off and goes off in weird directions. So I knew that there was unlimited potential. I didn't necessarily know what I was going to do with it, but I just immediately saw that there was unlimited potential, and that this was something, it was like the Wild West. It's like, hey, I can make it. I can do whatever I want with it.
So you went from that to, at the end of right before the .com bubble, selling. So what went on in between there?
Okay, so I had a client whose husband had died from cancer, and they were both self-employed. She was on the verge of bankruptcy. She had written a set of technical guides for the marine industry. She couldn't take them back to print. So if you got a book and you can't take it to print, you can't sell it. So you can't get any more money. So I started helping her and working to take that back to print. And then I was like, why are you even printing it anymore? Why? And she goes, because it's a book. You got to print it. And I'm like, well, not really. So I came up with this idea to develop a subscription-based service. So the books were still being printed, but I'm like, hey, if you do this subscription-based service, then you can constantly add new boats. You don't have to wait every few years and come out with another 1,200 or whatever in a book. You can constantly add them. So professionals, marine surveyors and yacht brokers and so forth are getting information quicker. And so I developed out a platform where marine professionals could have long-term subscriptions. But if it was somebody that was just looking for a boat to buy and they didn't really know what they were looking at, they just kind of wanted to explore, they could get a 24, 48-hour or 1 week subscription to just cruise around, Braille's boats. And I had this vision. I planned on building it out into like a full-blown platform where if you were on there having wine at night, you're like, oh, this boat looks cool. It might pop up and go, oh yeah, Jack has this boat over,
Oh, okay.
wherever. You might want this. So it's really weird. This was in '97. So it's really weird. It was a combination in my head, combination of advertising, social media, except there was no social media then, but I can look back on it now, and this guy has this, And so anyway, I was working on that, the building out concept, but I also knew I didn't have the resources to take it to fruition, financially nor anything, it takes a lot. And I also knew once somebody really discovered it, well, that it would be going anyway, because people with a lot of money would steal the idea. And coincidentally, a company came up and wanted to buy it. So it closed, I think, like 3 or 4 months before the dot-com bubble burst.
Woo, yeah, you dodged a bullet for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of my best friends, fellow stand-up comic, co-host of another podcast with me, is a NASCAR nerd.
Oh, okay.
He absolutely loves it. And he is also a veteran.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so this is the NASCAR team that's racing to combat veteran suicide. That's really close to my heart. Can you tell me how someone even gets into something like this? Because I'm reading about you, and it all sounds so complicated.
And, Steve Sims, my coach, says, you never make anything easy. Why do you have to do everything the hard way? Like, I don't know. I'm just weird. But a little background to help you understand why I am so stubborn and why I do things the hard way. My father was blind. So I grew up, you can do anything. And not only can you do anything and nothing can stop you from doing it, but also why are they even doing it that way? That's, so I grew up questioning everything. I didn't realize it because he was just daddy. But now as an adult, I realized that my brain from birth was just trained to not look at things the way that other people do. So I had worked with a NASCAR driver back in the early 2000s, a Daytona 500 winner. He was one of my clients. And so fast forward to the end of 2018, and a business associate of mine here locally, whose son was just getting started in NASCAR, asked for my help. They wanted to meet with me about strategy. Because he had gone from not racing at all, literally, not even karts, to when he was almost 15, starting out in pure stock, which is the very bottom of the local, and his 4th, 5th year was driving Xfinity, which is right below Cup. So you're looking at, if people know baseball, it's the equivalent of going from T-ball to AAA from age 15 to age 19 or 20. I can't remember, but 4 or 5 years in there. So, it was just crazy. Sorry, were you going to ask something?
Yeah, because that seems almost unheard of.
It is.
I take it that was a combination of him actually having some skill, but also the proper marketing and networking.
Actually, it was literally just skill, because he didn't have any marketing. He didn't have any networking. He just decided that he wanted to learn to race. And his father was like, hell no, I'm not spending $5,000 on a stupid race car. His dad was not into racing at all. And his mother's like, oh, he's, almost 15. If we do this, maybe it'll keep him out of trouble. It'll keep him, So they finally dragged the dad, and he bought the car, and he goes to the first few races. And then it's like, bling, he saw that Colin just had natural talent. And it's so funny because when Ryan, the dad, first started going, he was reading books. He's like sitting, he's like, I'm bored. Well, then his competitive nature got turned on, because he's an entrepreneur. His competitive nature, and was an athlete growing up, got turned on. And as Colin started going up there, his mom was like, oh my God, I'm scared. I don't want him to race anymore. And Ryan's like, no, we're not stopping. So it's really funny how, but no, it's Colin's totally natural talent. And there's even a guy who trains like fighter jet pilots, a civilian pilot who trains fighter jet pilots, in like mindfulness and so forth, that are going to be like taking off of aircraft carriers and so forth. And he said he has one of the fastest minds he's ever seen. He just grasps things really quickly. And he also has a great spatial awareness. So as his crew chief said, he said, most people, you have to tell them something a few times. It takes a while. They finally get it. He said, if you tell him something like right there in the pits, by the second or third turn, he's got it. He just thinks quickly. So when you put together the spatial stuff and his fast processing and everything, so it's just a fluke. I mean, I don't want to say he got lucky, but he did get lucky that he's like, oh, I want to race. And then he ended up being really good at it.
You know, some people have a natural inclination to things, and once they find it, it just hits, you know.
Yeah, it's really weird how that happens. And so I met with them in like November 2018, end of November, something like that. And in January 2019, Racing for Heroes called me wanting to develop a national awareness campaign. So at the time, all I knew was that they did.
Real quick, and if I interrupted you with the question you were already about to answer, my apologies. But can you tell us about that group a little more?
Yes. Yeah. So Racing for Heroes was founded by a retired Green Beret. And initially, it was just that this was founded by accident. When he got back dealing with his PTSD and so forth, he got back into racing, and he realized that it really helped him channel that anxiety and everything that fed his PTSD. It let his mind get in a zone. So he forgot about everything else. So he started getting friends involved. And anyway, it kind of accidentally became a nonprofit. But still, it was very small. By the time I met them, all I knew about was the racing part. So they're located here at Virginia International Raceway in the county that we live in. And I go out there expecting it to just be about racing. And I go in, and they started showing me they do free mental and physical health treatment, job training, job placement. I was blown away. Stuff like helping get people off of opioids, light therapy for traumatic brain injury, various treatments for PTSD, all kinds of stuff like that. So obviously they partner with doctors and medical professionals, but they had no paid employees. Everybody was volunteer. And I was like, if I charge anything, I'm literally taking money out of treatments. That's number one. But even if they had a lot of money and that wouldn't matter, you can't have a national awareness campaign if you don't have a national platform.
Very true.
So you either need somebody or something to help amplify your voice, or you need a lot of money and or a lot of time to dedicate to social media, whatever. Or you just have to be great naturally at social media. A little bit of background: my grandfather killed himself when I was 5, and my grandmother.
My condolences.
Well, thank you. And my grandmother tried to 3 years later. So that hit me really personally. And then my husband being retired Navy, 26 years, I knew how hard it was for us when he transitioned out, because the Navy is all he ever knew, except for being a cowboy before he went in.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're going to come out and be a cowboy again. And he had his master's degree and stuff, and he wanted to do something totally different than the military field, defense industry, but he didn't know what, and he didn't know where to start. So when I went out there, it really hit me from both sides. Personally, knowing how much easier our life could have been in the 90s, my whole family, the kids, my husband and myself, in the 90s, if he had had more resources to turn to, or support network, or anything like that. And mind you, he was not coming out at wartime like people are now. He had been in Vietnam for 3 years, but that was decades before. So he wasn't coming out in the middle of all of these conflicts. So when you put that, the memories of everything that we went through, and me trying to help him find himself, and combine that with the suicide mention, and I kind of like flipped back into the 5-year-old, thinking about the loss, it just really touched me. And I knew that I could not charge them, but I wanted to figure out a way to help. So Colin Garrett, the race car driver, both of his older brothers are active duty. So they're a double Blue Star family. For people that don't know, a Blue Star family is a family who has somebody who's active duty. So they're a double Blue Star family. So I contacted Ron, his dad, and said, hey, will y'all let me put a logo in the car? Well, I was like thinking like a little logo, you know. So that's what it started at. It was going to be a logo on the car, and we were just going to use Colin in some way to amplify it. And then mine and Ryan's brains combined, and we're very dangerous together. As he says we share half a brain, not a whole brain. We share half a brain. But so our brains start creating this combustion, and we're like, oh my God, this would be so cool if we could have this be the first team that is dedicated to helping promote veteran-owned businesses, military spouse-owned businesses, resources that help the entire military community, not just veterans, but families as well. And so that's how it got started.
Salutations, shades, and welcome back to your one-stop shop for all things strange and unusual, Talking with Shadows, the conversation everyone has, but no one wants to admit to. Here with your host, 𝑣𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒕.
And Marcus D. Now come along with us as we explore the most obscure things our universe has to offer. We specialize in helping people make sense of the most bizarre phenomenon you'll ever come across. You'll get all the great topics such as UFOs, cryptids, and psychic phenomenon, but also some stories that are so spectacular they scare people to believe that they're true. Now take a seat and welcome to the One Candle Society. But always remember, keep believing,
'cause we'll keep listening.
I appreciate when people put the effort forth. I mentioned this before. The listeners know this, but I have a brother who took his own life, who was a Marine veteran.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So thank you. It's a very close to my heart topic. So that started out, you wanted to put a decal on. You guys got to talking. I'm assuming it got bigger than that.
Yes, it got bigger and bigger. And I mean, before we knew it, we had Racing for Heroes all over the car. And let's take a step back and remember, this is the father who didn't want to spend like $4,500 or $5,000
Who was
to buy a
reading
car.
books.
So a couple million in, and his wife said, what the hell? So anyway, yeah, but in our mind, we're like, oh my God, this could be so cool. And anybody that knows anything about NASCAR also knows that their sponsorship model is broken. So I'm not going to get into all that, but we're also thinking entrepreneurially. We're like, this can be done so much better. It doesn't have to be about, here's some money, here's a spot on the car, here are a few tickets, go have a VIP, go have fun, see you later. We're like, we can approach this as a B2B thing where we're literally providing consulting. The car might be incidental. Somebody might not even want to be on the car, but they might need help with like recruiting, hiring, training, retaining veterans. They might want help with franchise marketing or, anything like that. And it doesn't have to be just with military, but, you got to have a place to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it just kept getting bigger and bigger in our mind, but we're like, we knew we wouldn't be able to get companies to come on board right away because most companies are afraid to try anything different. So we decided that we were going to crowdfund. We decided we're going to start an Xfinity team. So we're all the way up to AAA ball now. We're
right there.
Yeah. So this was 2019, the fall of 2019, and he had just started racing in 7. I can't even remember. Whenever 4 years before that.
And is this the car that was crowdfunded?
Yeah. Well, we crowdfunded one race, so it's not the whole team. The team is owned by his friend Sam Hunt. Hunt Racing. So Sam and Colin are the youngest owner-driver duo in NASCAR in the upper.
Oh, that's impressive as well.
Yeah. So Sam, I think, is 27.
It's a young man. Yeah. So, I remember myself at these ages when I hear about these miraculous people who do great things. And I think, when I was 27, God, I'm lucky I survived. I was just an idiot.
Well, that's what I always tell Colin. I'm like, oh my God, when I was your age, all I cared about was where's the next party. I was still in college. So I got to not live in the real world. But so
full disclosure. Now that I think about it, I was in prison all of age 27.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Well,
so there was that.
I got to have you on my show sometime. As a matter of fact, my latest book, Disrupt Your Now, I feature 50 entrepreneurs, not to get off topic, but one of the guys in there is an entrepreneur who served 15 years in prison for armed robbery.
Oh, wow. Absolutely. Anytime, hit me an email. We'll schedule something.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. So anyway, we at the same time go, let's start an Xfinity team. And how are we going to get the money? Because Xfinity is a lot more expensive. So we decided that we were going to crowdfund to get started. So this was November 2019. We wanted to go to Daytona for the first race. That's in beginning of February of the year. So we set a goal of 200,000. That's basically how much we needed to cover all the expenses to get there and get on the track. And we said anything above that, we're going to use to help the nonprofits that we're promoting. By this time, it was Racing for Heroes and the Rosie Network, which was founded by a retired admiral's wife, and they help train and mentor entrepreneurs. So we're looking at it holistically with the military community, because we feel like if your life is going well, the risk of suicide is automatically much less.
Yeah,
so
100%.
We look at it lifestyle, financially, everything.
You know what? Real quick, that was the first time I've heard someone mention that statement, and maybe it's been mentioned before, but I think that's very vital, that when your life is going well, your risk of suicide is significantly lower.
Yeah, and I want to point out, a lot of people will go, well, that's not true, because if that were true, all these really wealthy people wouldn't kill themselves. Hello, it's not all about money. You don't know what's going on in their life. You have no clue what their personal relationships are. You have no clue what trauma they might have had when they were younger that they've never overcome. So I truly do believe that, I don't want to sound all like lollipops and rainbows, but I truly do believe that if we can help people make their life as a whole better, that we could help reduce the risk of suicide for everybody. And not to get too far off track of the progression of what we were doing, but I also want to point out that on average, when somebody kills themselves, it affects 150 people right then and there, because it affects their family, their friends, their coworkers, their community, people who hear about it in the news. I mean, it just ripples out, and that's not counting the ripple effect through the generations of the family. But that's why they say suicide is contagious, because unfortunately, when some people see a person commit suicide, even if it isn't somebody they know, it makes it more real to them. But more real. I honestly do not think that my grandmother would have tried to kill herself if my grandfather hadn't. And I'm positive that if she had, she would not have done it with a gun, because women do not typically use guns. And my grandma, she had to put on rouge and lipstick to go in the front yard. So women typically don't use guns because they don't want to, they don't want to get messed up. And like I said, it's true. My grandma was all prissy, so I look at it very pragmatically. Even as a child, I was like, she did it because he did it, So we decided that we were going to crowdfund. Goal was 200,000. We'd never crowdfunded. People in NASCAR love Colin and Sam, but they're laughing. They're, they're buddies, the drivers and the crew, pit crews and stuff. And they're calling them the people's team, like, Well, next thing they know, we surpassed our $200,000 goal, and we raised enough to pay for stem cell treatments for a veteran who has multiple sclerosis from exposure to chemicals while on active duty. And they're like, holy, I don't know if I can curse, but holy whatever.
Oh, say as you please.
Okay, holy shit. They're just like, what? And then they started calling us the people's team respectfully. They're like, oh man, they're tapping into something. And we had so many people reach out to us. Thank you so much. I was a NASCAR fan for so long, and drivers are basically free agents now. So there are a lot of people who were big fans, and now their driver might race for a team they hate or for So they're like, I haven't been following in a few years because I just didn't feel connected. Thank you so much. Now I feel like I have a team again.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it helps everybody.
The gentleman who received the stem cell treatments, can I ask about his recovery? A little follow up. How's he doing?
Yes. Okay. I can tell you in the short run, he started, I think he had his first treatment in January, and I believe, I think he had them once a month. About 4 to 5 months after his first treatment, his MRI showed no new lesions. Some lesions had totally disappeared, and many of the ones that were there had shrunk in size. And he had gone from, I had met him before, and if he were sitting on a scooter, you would never know there was anything wrong. You might think, oh, he must have like a busted ankle or something.
Okay.
But he could not stand on his own at all. He had to have 2 full-grown men hold him up, and it, couldn't support any weight whatsoever. So he went from that to being able to hold some weight on his own, being able to stand up, being able to take a few steps. So I have not, we're friends, but I don't reach out all the time and be like, hey, what's going on? It's a continual progression. I know that he's improving, but I don't know exactly, what the status is now. But that blew my mind.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I really don't know much about stem cell treatment. I just know like people who've used their own stem cells, like for knee stuff and everything. And I'm like, okay. I had no idea that it would make that much, and especially it's one thing if somebody's doing something different, because a lot of people would probably go, oh, that's the placebo effect. He thinks he can do it. He thinks he can hold his own weight, so he is. But when you have that MRI that you can show that things have disappeared and shrunk, and I mean, to me, that was just mind blowing.
Yeah, he didn't psychosomatically improve his lesions, or he would have done that before.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that. And you guys were the first team to do that.
Yeah, and this was February of 2020, so we're like, yes. And we had been on national TV while we were down there. We were featured on We Are the Mighty, which is a big site dedicated towards telling good stories about the military community instead of just all the negative stuff. So
which we need more of. Yes.
We were getting a lot of press, and then, of course, like everybody else, COVID hit, and we got we got clipped. We had our feet knocked out from under us. So we've been like everybody else, transitioning the whole time. Haven't been able to race every race. As a matter of fact, he probably only raced like maybe 8 races this year. When we don't have the money for him to race, Sam, the team owner, has to basically sells the race to another driver. But we're trying really hard to follow through on this vision, because we look at it as a long-term commitment. We don't look at it as this is a gimmick to get Colin on the racetrack. We look at it as he's only 21. He could easily race for 15 years. And we see this as a mission that we can literally help an entire generation of young kids grow up and have something to learn from and look at.
Absolutely. You guys are doing a lot of interesting things over there. You were the first to let micro businesses be a part of the National NASCAR campaign.
Yeah. So in the crowdfunder, if a verified veteran or military spouse-owned small business gave a minimum of $10, we had a badge they got to use in their marketing. It had NASCAR. It had the NASCAR logo. It had Colin's logo, and so it was Veteran Business Advocate is what it was called. And so they were able to use that and these are solopreneurs, micro businesses, who could probably even barely afford the $10. Nobody has ever done anything like that. I mean, usually with NASCAR, because hey, it's a really, really expensive sport. The tires are like $20,000 for one race. So normally you look at putting a logo that big on a car, you're looking at a couple $100,000.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
For a race. So, so we've done some really, really cool things. I'm so proud of it. And I'm so proud of Colin, the driver. and Sam, the team owner, because this whole time, you know, when we met with the Rosie Network, when we met with that founder, when we were first partnering up with her, instead of Colin and Sam, now Colin at the time would have been, I guess, 19, maybe still 18, and Sam would have been like 24. And instead of looking at the Rosie Network founder and going, what are you going to do for us? We got to have money to raise. Their thing to her was, we do not want people to feel like we are taking advantage of the military community, because everywhere you look, there's a logo stuck somewhere, and that's fine. That's good to bring awareness, but they were so worried that people were going to think they were grifters or something, you know? And I'm just so proud to be affiliated with somebody like that, because so many people my age, or, you know, whatever, 50 up, whatever, I'm 60. So a lot of older people are like, oh, you know, millennials and Gen Z, you know, they're just so lazy and they don't care. And maybe the ones you know are, but they're not all like that. And I'm just really, really proud of working with them. Last night, we raced in Martinsville, an Xfinity Series race. Martinsville is basically Colin's local track.
Okay.
It's like less than an hour from his home. And so we had Veterans Grow America on the hood and the quarter panels. That's a small business that promotes other veteran and military spouse-owned companies. They do expos all over the country. So we had them, we had the Rosie Network, Racing for Heroes, Mohawk Matt Denny, who was a friend of mine, who has a social media or marketing business, and also like helps promote just positive things in the community. And then my book was on what they call the deck lid, which in the real world is the trunk, you know, on top of, they call that the deck lid. So we go in, we started 30th out of, it was probably 40 cars, I'm not sure. We started 30th because they didn't have qualifying. It's based on points because of COVID, and, you know, so
everything's wonky right now.
Yeah. So the more established teams automatically have more points because you get points for every race, blah, blah, blah. So we start 30th. We're like, that's fine. Colin can beat his way, you know, up. Well, maybe a third of the way in, his brakes, he lost his brakes.
Oh, no.
We're like, oh my God. Well, so he ended up falling back to, I think, like 33rd, 34th. He hung in there. We finished 14th in overtime with like, it was something like 15 laps to go. He was like 21st, and then he was 18, and it was crazy. So I think when they had the restart for overtime, I think he was 18. I believe he was in 18. And I was like, please, just hold him for top 20. And then I thought he finished at 17. It wasn't until the race was even over that I knew it was 14. Top 15.
That's impressive.
People that aren't familiar with racing don't realize top 15 in racing is a really big deal, especially when you're talking about basically still a new team that is bootstrapping it. When everybody else, you know, most racers, frankly, you know, at that level, most of them come from the racing world, you know, racing royalty, or they come from families where, you know, somebody who's a millionaire, that's not NASCAR money. There's NASCAR rich, then there's rich, you know?
Yeah.
And so most of the drivers at that level come from those kind of families. Not when you get to Cup, you know, they work their way up, and then they have real sponsorship money. But a lot of the stuff in Xfinity is still generated from, you know, family relationships and stuff.
Now, I'm going to touch on your books here, but real quick, I just want to bring up that you guys were the first Black-owned service disabled veteran-owned NASCAR sponsor, and the first underwritten campaign to support the blind Braille paint scheme and blind-owned NASCAR sponsor. That is very interesting.
Yes, my friend Oooby Wedler, who I met in Clubhouse last winter, he's a PhD chemist. He was born blind. He was awarded Champion of Change Award by President Obama. He created the Tasting in the Dark campaign for Francis Ford Coppola Winery, where people are blindfolded to taste. Just does some amazing things. Well, Hobie and I really hit it off because, as I said earlier, my dad was blind, and Hobie this summer was launching a new seasonings blend company. And so we wanted to help him launch it.
This guy sounds like he's in everything. I love it.
He is. And he does a lot of work with companies in the food and beverage industry with sensory experiences. But so he's launching a seasoning blend this summer called Hobie's Essentials. And we're going to actually help him with the crowdfunder to crowdfund the first Braille labels on seasoning packaging. It's very expensive. People wouldn't think it was that big a deal, but it is, because it's got to be something that won't flatten in shipping and when a bunch of people touch it and everything. So anyway, yeah, we had the first Braille paint scheme and the first blind owned company as a sponsor. We had so the driver's name is over each door. So on the passenger side door, we had Colin's name in Braille, and then
oh man.
Yeah, in the bottom left corner of each of the numbers, everywhere the car number was, it had the Braille version. That was so cool, and it meant so much to me personally because of my dad. And I was laughing. I told Hobie, if Daddy were still alive, y'all would just be fighting over who gets to drive the car, you know?
Yeah.
MC Auto Detailing is a home-based detailing company located in 𝒂𝒄𝒂𝒕, Pennsylvania. At MC Auto, we take care of all of your detailing needs, from a basic hand wash to a complete makeover of your vehicle. Busy schedule? MC Auto is also mobile. You can get your vehicle detailed in the comfort of your own home. With a 5-star rating on Google, we treat your vehicle as if it was our own. For a free quote and more information, contact MC Auto on Facebook and Instagram at MC Auto Detailing LLC or call 724-462-4863. MC Auto Detailing. Who doesn't like a clean car?
Yeah.
Because my father used to drive boats for his friends to go water skiing. So, I mean, that's the kind of person you're talking about.
That's wild. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a wild man.
He rode horses, he shot guns, he did everything. Played basketball with us. It was crazy.
Okay, I got a question.
So
I'm sorry.
we had Oooby on the car in Michigan, Daytona, and Darlington. He didn't get to be at the Michigan race, but he was at Daytona. And it was so emotional for me when he first felt of the car, because he could feel the Braille over the door.
That's amazing.
I have video of him reading off C. Garrett. It makes the hair on my arm stand up. It was just so fulfilling to me.
That's very beautiful. Real quick, when your father was shooting, was he aiming at anything?
Well, we used to target shoot at our cabin in the mountains. We'd put up like cans and stuff, and then somebody would throw something, hit it. We didn't stand out there and knock on it, but somebody would throw something and hit it so he could get his bearings. And I mean, people don't understand that when somebody's blind, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, it's like a bat. They can see, they're just not seeing the same way that we are. And so if somebody drove him to our cabin in the mountains, so it's like 120 miles from where we live, if somebody drove him up there and they'd never been, he could tell them, okay, about, a mile down the road, you're going to go on a dip and around a curve, and then you're going to take the first right. I mean, he could literally tell them, just like you would. He knew where he was at all times, and he could project, where they were going and when they were going to get there. It blew people's minds. Hobie is the same way, though. But it's but my father was not born blind. Hobie was. Daddy started losing his sight when he was 8. But yeah, he was aiming at stuff, but like target shooting. But he had a horse, and he'd go out riding all the time by himself, or he would do trail rides. It might be like 35 miles one day and 30 the next.
Father sounds like a hell of a man. Holy hell.
Yeah, he was. And we didn't realize it growing up because he was just Daddy. And all of his friends used to be like, oh my God, Glenn's amazing. And we're like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
It was just Daddy. But none of his friends could ride his horse. They all had horses, but she would buck them off like that. And when he was out riding, she would go around limbs, I mean, I guess probably because when she was little, he got her when she was a cold. I guess when he first started riding, he hit his head enough that she just started real. But you know, it was really wild. But he played basketball with us. We had a goal at our house, and we would knock on the post. So we'd play like around the world and you know, things like that. We would knock on the post so that he could judge the distance, and he knew how high the goal was. So
that is amazing. Holy hell. So you're an author as well, and your most recent book is Disrupt Your Now.
Yeah.
And can you tell us about that one? It's a book about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so it's Disrupt Your Now, the Successful Entrepreneur's Guide to Reimagining Your Business and Life. And so what I did is I have 50 entrepreneurs from around the world, ranging from internationally known celebrity experts like Steve Sims, the author of Bluefishing.
By the way, Steve Sims will be a guest, I believe, next month on the podcast.
Awesome. He's great. He's my coach now as well. Jeffrey Madoff. Oh, and by the way, Steve's clients, like pre-me, not coaching clients in his first business are people like Richard Branson and Elon Musk.
Holy hell.
Deal. So there's somebody like that in the book. And then Jeffrey Madoff, who owns a video production company, whose clients you may have heard of. It's like Ralph Lauren and Tiffany and Company.
Yeah, they're small potatoes.
So people like that, down to the guy I mentioned who was in prison for 15 years for armed robbery and a teenager on the autism spectrum. So I have a wide variety of people so that everybody can find somebody they can relate to in some way, because too often people read things and they're like, yeah, well, that all sounds good, but of course they could do it. I could never do that, you know? And so I was trying to avoid that. And also the whole book, it's very short stories. Each story comes from a conversation with these people, very short anecdotal story of something that they went through, something that happened to them. And then each story ends with a lesson from Lisa. I have a takeaway. So there's 50 entrepreneurs, 102 lessons. And I call it the bathroom book for business, because you could literally just sit down and, you know, start reading anywhere. It's not like you have to read from beginning to end and remember, you know, what you read yesterday.
No, that's fascinating. You know, I think when you say people look at like businesses like they could do it, but I never could, I think two things stand out. The first one is a lot of people want the results without putting in the work.
Yes, that is for true.
And the second thing is we're looking at it the wrong way, I think, because like take someone like Richard Branson. You look at him now, and obviously you think, well, I can't obtain that tonight. Okay, let's see where they started. Let's see the steps they took. Let's see how they got there. That's why I like to get to know people and see their process.
Yeah, like Steve is a high school dropout. He quit when he's 15. He grew up in a bricklaying family. So you need anybody out there, you really should go read his book, Bluefishing. It's fascinating. Read that before you see him on this show. And then that way you'll appreciate even more what he has done. I think Richard Branson dropped out of high school too. And I apologize if I'm wrong about that, but I think he did. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see, people are impatient, like you said, but also we start our business, we're like, yes, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to be in control of my life. Can make as much as I want, do what I want, work with who I want. But then we look around at everybody around us and we start doing what they're doing. We're like, okay, I'm in the whatever business. So if somebody's successful, they're doing this, so I got to do it. Blah, you know. And the next thing we know, we own a business that is not what we ever wanted. You know, we went from hating to manage people and this, that, and the other, and all of a sudden somebody may be very, very successful financially, but they may have built their business in a way that has them miserable. And they're just dreaming of, well, one day I'll be able to sell it and then I can do whatever. And I'm like, that's why I say disrupt your now. I'm like, stop it with the someday, one day, whatever. Disrupt your now. Figure out something that you can do right now that can start edging you to where you want to be.
No, that's a great thought process too. I use this concept in stand up a lot. I'll talk to a lot of guys and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm not ready for this. I don't want to do this." I tell them I've never been ready for anything I've ever done.
Yeah,
The only way to get ready is to throw yourself in.
that's right. You are never going to be ready. If you are ready, then you are thinking way too small. You should never be ready. And you should also always surround yourself with people who are at a higher level than you.
Hmm.
And it may be success as in money, or with comics, it may be success as in number of bookings or the size of bookings, but it may not even be that. It may be success in they are living life the way I want to live it. Like for me, I don't want a big business. I don't want a bunch of employees. The most employees I've ever had are six. And I didn't look at them as employees. They work on their own and we just talk every now and then. I
Yeah.
do not like I don't like managing people. I'm just not. And so for me, success for me is being able to live where I want, work with people I want to work with, do what I want. And oh, by the way, if I decide I don't like this today, next week I can be doing something totally different. I like being in a place that I can constantly shape shift.
Now you touched on it earlier that people equate money for happiness too, and that's
Yeah.
not always the case. You need to have some type of self-fulfillment, like what brings you joy.
Yeah, and that's why the last chapter in the book is actually having a higher purpose. That
Okay.
you can, you know, there's always going to be somebody who has more money. And if money were the secret, like we mentioned earlier, then you wouldn't have wealthy people who are alcoholics or drug addicts or who commit suicide or who abandon their families or whatever they do. So money is, yes, is it money's great because if you don't have to worry about money, if you don't have to worry about putting food on the table and paying your basic bills, that's great. But most people, once we get to that point, everybody's about keeping up with the Joneses. And when
Hmm.
you want to keep up with the Joneses, there's always a Jones that has a bigger house and a flashier car. So you have to figure out what is it that's important to you personally. Forget about everybody else. What is it that would make you feel like life is worth living?
Yeah, to me, money equals creative freedom.
Yes,
Because it's like as long as my bills are paid, then I can go and create and invest in what I want, my art or whatever it is. And I feel like a lot of times people get the money and it's a hollow feeling
yeah,
because they're okay, well now I can afford to get this nice car or this huge TV, but when they go home, inside in your heart you're not fulfilled, you're not happy.
yeah, that is so true. And what happens, even though they're making a lot more money, they're just keeping on spending it all because their
Hmm.
tastes have just, so they're still where they were. They're still trapped. They
Yeah.
don't have the freedom to just go, all right, this isn't what I want to do right now. So let me go. And I'm not talking about being irresponsible, but I'm just talking about figuring out what is important to you that would make you want to get up out of bed in the morning and make you be a nicer, happier person and better for your family to live with. You
House
know,
poor is the best
yeah.
description I can
Mhm.
give. And it's when they get this more money and they spend it more like that. It's now you're still trapped in the same cycle, but now it's higher risks.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
if you got a $500 apartment and you screw up your $500, you could maneuver something and potentially borrow that. But when you got a $10,000 mortgage and a
Right.
staff you got to pay $5,000 a month for, you're going to lose everything.
That's right. Yeah. And
No,
so they're really not even as well off as they were when they had that $500 apartment.
you also wrote Boomer Cash Out.
Yeah, so I wrote this in 2017, not long after my mom died, well, 3 years, I think. But obviously, I'm a baby boomer, and I've been in the internet business forever, 25 years now. And there are just so many people, I would say like age 50 and older, who don't really understand why they need to be using the web more effectively in their business. And my point is, you are never, ever going to be able to sell your business if you cannot integrate the web effectively, because younger people are not going to want to buy it. And so if you do have a business that you're hoping to sell one day, you have got to integrate the web. But it's not just for that. Sorry, go ahead.
And not for nothing, just real quickly, I think COVID also slammed that into people's heads too.
It did. And I thought, when I wrote the book, I was like, I'm so sick of having this conversation. So I was like, I'm just going to write it in the book, and then people will listen, because it's something about it being written down that they go, oh, it must be important, And so basically, Boomer Cash Out is just all the stuff in my head just written down. It's not a how-to, and it's all in layman's terms. But it's just explaining to people the kinds of things they could be doing and why it would be important for them to do it. But it's not all about just being able to sell a business either. It's about, okay, so for example, if you don't like managing people like me, what kind of things can you use technology for so that you can continue to grow and scale without hiring people? Things
Absolutely.
like that. Things like that. And then I also help them understand. I think so many people who are older are embarrassed. They feel stupid or whatever. They don't know what to ask. And even if somebody tells them, how do they know if the person's being honest with them? Because if you're speaking one language, somebody else speaking another, you have no clue what they're saying. So that's the other thing I go into in the book, is that older people are digital immigrants. We did not grow up in the digital age.
Great phrasing.
And younger people are digital natives. So you have to be able to have a translator. And, when an immigrant moves to America, some people totally immerse themselves in America, and the generations all become fluent in English. And I'm not saying give up their culture, but they really, really immerse themselves and want to be fluent in the language.
They assimilate.
Yes, assimilate. And others come in and they stay more isolated, they stay more insulated, and inevitably they cannot be as successful in our culture because they've insulated themselves. And so that's what I try to get people to explain. It's the same thing. And there's nothing wrong with you not knowing the language. There's nothing wrong with you not understanding all this terminology, but you really need to try to understand it, and you need to have a translator who can help you ask the right questions, because if you don't know the right question to ask, you can't ask it. And you can't ever know if you get the right answer.
Very true. The immigrant analogy is beautiful, because I just think of, like, as you mentioned, older people can be embarrassed. And younger people, you grow up, especially now, on the computers and the web. That's like a child of an immigrant family being born here, being fluent, and your father still struggles with the language. It's like, look, we understand, but your son can help you communicate.
Exactly. And a lot of times with the older people, it is because they're embarrassed. Sometimes it's because they're like, no, I want to keep my thing. But I think a lot of people, and it's natural, we are embarrassed. We don't want to make a fool out of ourselves. Younger people don't care. They're not afraid if they're going to break anything, or, that's why kids just get on a computer and start, you have a 2-year-old that it's not like anybody ever teaches them how to play games. They just start.
That's true. That's very true.
So book, it's just layman's language. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's a really short book. It's only like 70 pages. It's a really fast read.
I tell you what, this is a good time to promo yourself. Shout out, all your sites, where you can be found, all that jazz.
All right. So my site is lisakipps-brown.com, LISAKIPPS-BROWN.com. Both of my books are on the site. Boomer Cash Out and Disrupt Your Now. I guess they're backwards. DisruptYourNow.com. That's a site, but it goes to a section of my site about it. My books are available on Amazon and pretty much anywhere that you can buy books. And I'm going to be doing the audiobook. I haven't done it yet, and I'm going to be reading it. So if my voice is annoying to y'all, don't mind.
I think you have a wonderful Southern charm.
Thanks.
Real quick before we get off here, this was very interesting, phenomenal, and I want to thank you. But this is the point in the episode where I asked my guests for a piece of advice for the listeners, and it doesn't have to be about NASCAR or suicide, anything specific, just a piece of advice you think would help people.
Okay, so since we're talking about entrepreneurship, it's your business and you can make it anything you want.
That was succinct, but great advice. Lisa.
And I intentionally stopped because I'm like, stop and think about that.
Yeah,
you know?
That was great advice. I want to thank you so much for coming on the program. It's
welcome.
Been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really had fun, and I'll send you a link to get on my show too.
Thank you so much, guys. Check her out, Lisa Kipps-Brown. Wonderful human, just phenomenal. I cannot review highly enough.
Well, I will go tell my husband you said that.
You know what? While you're at it, tell your husband I said thank you for your service.
Okay, I will. Thanks so much, Johnny.
Guys, if you liked what you heard, share, subscribe, leave a review, do something. Make sure you check out Lisa. Until next time, guys, peace and love.
The Inquisitive Minds Podcast.